The National Assembly of Guyana historically meets in the hallowed chambers of the public buildings. It is here that the largest decision-making body of Guyana meets to make and debate on issues relative to national development. In any democratic independent nation, the Parliament is usually the body that represents the law-making arm of government, and its mandate is of equal importance to the other arms. Guyana, like many other Commonwealth nations, abide by the Westminster style of parliament, one that has as a main characteristic the government side sitting on the right side of the speaker, whereas members of the opposition occupy the benches on the left. But there are other important instruments that are needed for the proper functioning of any parliament. The Mace has throughout history been represented as an instrument that displays strength or authority. Ceremonial maces originated in the ancient Near East, where they were used as symbols of rank and authority across the region during the late Stone Age, Bronze Age, and early Iron Age. During medieval times, the mace was a weapon used by warriors in close combat during war to break the chainmail or body armor of opposing knights. During this period in England, the king's bodyguards were known as sergeants at arms, and they carried all maces. Although the significance of the mace has altered over centuries, it is still seen as a symbol of power. For this reason, it is deemed a ceremonial symbol of authority, and it is used in Commonwealth parliaments. In this feature, we will explore the details of the mace. What is a mace? The history of the mace, and just how the mace became such a powerful parliamentary representation of the speaker's authority. In Guyana, a mace was used for the first time on 10th of September 1957. It was made of silver gilt and at the time depicted British royal arms. The mace was designed and made by Gerard and Company Limited, Crown Jewelers, formerly the Goldsmiths and Silversmiths Company Limited. Since its introduction for use in 1957, the mace has undergone one design change as a consequence of Guyana's attainment of republican status on the 23rd of February 1970. Instead of having its former British monarchical symbols, the newly commissioned coat of arms of Guyana was engraved onto the new head of the mace.
The function of the mace. The mace symbolizes the authority of the state whenever Parliament is meeting. It has its origin in medieval times. The mace literally was a club with a long stem and a heavyweight bulb at the end, and it was a very lethal weapon in war.
The original stem, which is 145.5 centimeters in length, depicts a Victoria Regia lily, one of the largest water lilies in the world, first discovered in British Guyana during the reign of Queen Victoria, and our national flower, hence the name given to it. The stem also includes representation of a rice stalk in full bearing and a sugarcane stalk in blossom, representing two of Guyana's principal products. The mace is a ceremonial object, but also holds great plenary importance. The speaker explains this best when he describes the position of the mace when bills are being enacted.
How important it is. The tradition, the convention is that the mace points from the government side to the opposition. Normally, the government sits on the right-hand side of the speaker. So the proper position of the mace is the head pointing towards the government side or to the speaker's right-hand side, and then the end of the mace, the end of the staff, pointing to the opposition or the left-hand side of the speaker. There is a particular position that the mace should be in, and if I can use our mace number 3, which is another smaller replica, the mace would normally sit in on a stand as is and pointing from the government to the opposition, the speaker's right hand, to the left-hand side in this position. If it's not in this position, then the House is not in full meeting, and the authority is not extended over the entire proceedings of the National Assembly. Sometimes the mace is in the House, but not in its position pointing in that way. And the mace is always held in a high position in the National Assembly. Whenever we have what is called the House resolving itself into committee, the mace is taken down from its high position and put at a lower level, meaning that the House is not in session, but we are in committee. And there are discussions in committee and votes passed in committee. When that is done, then you have to now report to the Assembly, the full House. And then the mace is put back in position above everyone else, and the House is in position.
When he enters or leaves the chambers, the Speaker is preceded by the Sergeant at Arms bearing the mace on his right shoulder. When the National Assembly is in session, the mace is placed on the clerk's table with its head pointing towards the government side of the chamber. When the Assembly is sitting as a committee of the whole Assembly, the mace is placed below the clerk's table.
A person cannot vote in our Parliament unless they vote from their seat. That vote is not counted. You can't be standing in the hallway, standing and voting. So we need to examine whether those two conditions existed at the time of the passage of a legislation. First, I must say we have a number 1 mace, a number 2 mace, and we can have a number 3 mace, a number 4 mace, and a number 5 mace. The important thing is that the mace is in the House and that it is in position when the business of the House is being conducted. The authority of the state is that mace. There are several parliaments that have more than 1 maces. And for a number of reasons, you may need to move from the number 1 mace to the number 2 mace to the number 3 mace. A mace could be damaged. It could be stolen. It could, in the transportation, in our case, as we are moving from our office in Stabroek at Parliament Buildings to the Convention Center, it's caught in traffic. It's hijacked. What happens? Do we not have the business of the state being conducted? And so early last year, I looked at, as an inspiration, this mace sitting on my desk and said, in the event that we have any disruption in terms of having our number 1 mace in place, we need to have an alternative. And so we commissioned another mace.
The mace refers to the authority of the Speaker. It is a symbol of power and respect to the Speaker and is usually placed at the rostrum in front of the Speaker, signaling his or her authority. Members of legislatures rarely defy the Speaker because of the respect they display for the mace. However, in what is seemingly a global trend, parliaments around the world are being more intense in their debates. It is a place that usually allows for heated and meaningful debates. But parliamentarians in some quarters are becoming more physical in their approaches. Although these flare-ups are not strange, they tend to leave a bad taste in the mouths of the citizenry and further display gross disrespect for the august House. A recent disruption in National Assembly here on December 29 could be likened to such an act. It involved the mace. The act was shameful and disrespectful to the authority of the Speaker. by not only grabbing but attempting to remove the mace from the assembly.
Parliaments tend to be not always a place of orderliness and civility. That is why there are rules that govern the operations of the Parliament. In our case, in particular, the National Assembly. And those rules are called standing orders. And these rules evolve from centuries of practice, especially in the British Parliament. So our rules are called our standing orders. And where our standing orders are silent, we have and we rely on a Bible called Erskine May, May's Rules of Parliamentary Procedure. Erskine May was a clerk of the House of Commons, and over his time, he documented all of the rules, all of the deviations, all of the situations that arose, and so it's this long history of practice and procedure to maintain law, order, and civility in the House. That is why we have these rules, and we have these procedures, and we have this heritage of putting not only the symbols in place, but ensuring we have rules that are implemented so that we can have orderliness in the business of the state in our House of Representatives. So this is extremely important. And so orderliness was one of the challenges we had. There are rules governing gross misconduct of persons in the House, and persons can be sanctioned. We have this occurring recently in Parliament, but not only in our Parliament, it's happening in other parliaments. We've had parliaments being a place where people do not always obey the rules of decency, orderliness, and civility that ought to be implemented in any civilized society. I want to say, especially to our younger people, that it may seem that the mace being in position is a symbolic thing and could be ignored. But we ought to understand that while it is symbolic, it's like a wedding ring. You know, you're married, you wear it to show that this is the respect you have for that sacred ceremony. And the sanctity of the house is very similar. So we need to have not only these symbols of authority and the state, but respect for them. Respect for them. And for young people, I want to say that Parliament is there so that persons can discuss the state affairs. The alternative to the people's representatives sitting and discussing the state's affairs is unthinkable. And the world has moved away from that. Yes, emotions will run high and run wild too, but we always have to give dialogue the first opportunity. And there are no winners in wars. But in dialogue, you can have compromise, you can have understanding, and you could eliminate ignorance and arrogance.